to them. Nearly every piece of music that they make is amazing. Now, let's hear from a Bradford man who knows firsthand how it feels to be accused of being a terrorist. Tariq Mehmood, along with 11 others, was arrested on charges of terrorism in Bradford in 1981. The so-called Bradford 12 were all acquitted at Leeds Crown Court. He now lives in Beirut, where he teaches university students how to write fiction and has a new book out called Song of Gulazarina. Tariq has just arrived back in the UK and about to start a tour of the nation with his book, which is based on a Bradford man and his life over a period of 70 years. And Tariq joins me now on the phone. Welcome to the programme, Tariq.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
You're very welcome, and thanks for your time. Now, they say that we all have a book inside us waiting to be written, but tell me about your particular book.
Well, we do have a book to be written, and we should all value the stories that we have inside us, because we're all amazing in our own sort of way, and all of our stories deserve to be told, and very often we have the ability to tell it and the desire to tell it, but sometimes we don't get a chance. I got my chance to tell my stories, and this story really is a continuation of my other stories that I've been writing over the years. And it's a story of an old man who has never known peace. And it's a little bit of my own story and the stories of all of my friends from Bradford and Leeds and elsewhere. But it's a story of loss and longing and yearning and a search set in a war, which your listeners will be well aware, those of us who come from India or Pakistan or Kashmir, that actually we've always been in war. It's never ended. There was never a Cold War for us. But within the context of war, stories are actually about human life. And mine is the story of a person who wants justice both from the injustices around, but also in terms of a relationship with his daughter and lost relationships with his loves.
Mm. So would you say what happened to you or your own personal experiences were the inspiration behind this book?
I think there certainly is an element, because when I grew up in Bradford, I looked around me and I thought things that were wrong. And I saw that I was part of those who was wronged. And I saw the wrongdoers as well, if you like. And in that sense, that does come across in my writing. Sometimes I get very angry and very bitter about what I see around me. And at the other times I get very sad, but very often quite joyful as well. So it's not a tearjerker. It is in parts, but not all the way through.
So is this what spurs you on to write when you see things around you and you, as you say, sometimes it's anger, sometimes it's not? Is that what kind of keeps you going to write these stories?
I want us, I like to feel that actually my time on this earth is a very unique time, and the stories that we have is what makes us human. And those of your listeners who are in love will know that there's no love without a story. So in that sense, what keeps me going is the insatiable appetite for us human beings to find out our stories. But in a sense, and for me, is to share those stories.
Okay, so this book is for adults, but you do also write for children. Which one of these two categories do you find easier?
Well, actually, I write for children because I have children, and I can't find the literature for them. When you are 15, 16, my son, for example, was born on the day that the West started bombing Afghanistan. He's now 15. So my daughter couldn't understand what the world around her has accused her of. You're not proper. Hence, my last novel was called You're Not Proper.
Right.
But I'm not a child anymore. So I also write and try to understand that the world we live in is complicated. But actually, I am at once angry with the West. At the same time, I am the West. I'm no longer the East. However, it's my East that bleeds. It's the West that bleeds us. So in that sense, I write a story for young adults, which is also set in war. But really, it's not a story of bombs and bullets. It's about blessings. It's about beliefs. It's about search. It's about identity. It's about hope. And I also write, in a sense, the same theme, but on a much, much more deeper level. The book, The Song of Gulazarina, took me well over 11 years to write, and really it bled out of me over the years with many, many tears. It was a very, very difficult book to write.
Now, it's unusual to find writers, successful writers, who write for both adults and for children. If you had a choice, or you had to make a choice, what would you choose?
I don't think I can now choose between the two, because the children are not children for very long. I'm writing for young adults who are 15 to 17, the last book, and the one that will come out next year. But really, a few years later, they're often in the front lines of war. I mean, I have been with families who came to my house during the time of the opposition to the British invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan, and they were in tears when their sons went and joined the military a few years later. So children are only children for a very small time, but the point is, I want fiction in which I am represented. I don't want to be represented as a white character. My children had no books to read in which the characters, the lead characters, were not white, or might as well have been white. But on the more serious issue of Song of Gulazarina, what would you do? I ask people, when they get angry with the subject of this book, because it's a 77-year-old suicide bomber, as the back blurb explains, who had lost his faith in religion. And yet he's lost something far more fundamental in his life. Now, what would you do if somebody constantly puts you down, blows up your houses, burns the ground under you? What would you do? This is a question I kept posing. But actually the incidents described in the book were incidents I saw. I lived in Peshawar once, and this was when the jihadis were in flavor, and I saw horrors with my own eyes, and the eyes of my friends as well. And I'd buried them. They were so horrible in terms of both violence, in terms of the nastiness, that when I began to write this book, I really thought for a moment I'd built the stories up out of my imagination, some of them, and then I phoned a friend in Peshawar. I said, tell me about this woman about who I'm writing. Is it true, or is it my memory? He goes, no, it's true. This was a woman who was kidnapped by the Russians, then captured by the Mujahideen, then the guy who tried to free her. I mean, that's not all the details in my book. This was the background to the story. He was then really killed in a very brutal way, and I'd buried these ideas into some dark depths of my memory. And when I began to write, I then realized that, no, I witnessed a lot more than I remember. And
so fact sometimes mixes up with fiction because you have experienced so much, and you say you put it at the back of your mind.
It's true, fiction and faction, for the want of another thing. There's a very small line of demarcation between them. But the thing is that in the fictional panorama, the literary panorama, so to speak, the world makes sense to me sometimes. I don't know how to understand it in any other way, but trying to understand how people would react in certain situations. I'm a migrant in this country, yet I shouldn't have been a migrant in this country. I leave England, but England never leaves me. It will never leave me. So I've reconciled that contradiction. On the one hand, my desire to leave. On the other hand, an acceptance that it can't leave me because I'm a product of its history. And it is something in which I have been born from 1846, when England sold my ancestors. So it's a separation I can never have. So this is what I try to deal with. But remember, the novels are not academic works. They are stories, and stories of human beings are paintings of pictures that we embed in words.
Now, you obviously tackle a lot of issues in your books. Now, how has this particular book been received so far?
It's only just come out, I think.
Right.
The first review really reduced me to tears. There were some parts within it which were very touching. And there's 5 or 6 more reviews coming. It hasn't formally been released in England yet, though you can buy it online or order it in any bookshop.
And when will it be released in England?
I'm beginning the tour in the summer, so I've invitations from Bradford, Leeds, Birmingham, and a number of cities. I'm just trying to collect them all in so that I can just do a systematic plan and talk to people and encourage them to write. It's not all about me promoting myself. I'm reaching a stage it doesn't really matter anymore. But really, for all of us, if we don't write our stories, we become the stories of somebody else.
Very interesting, very interesting. So, are you going to be coming to Leeds, Bradford, when you do the tour?
I will do. I have invitation from some friends and colleagues in Leeds, and I'll certainly be at an invitation from the Bradford Literature Festivals. And these two northern towns are very important. I was in jail in Leeds.
I do remember, sorry to cut you off, I do remember the Bradford 12. I used to live in Bradford at the time, so I do remember, and it has been a great pleasure to talk to you today. Very interesting. And we hope that when you do actually tour the country in summer, that you will get in touch with us and we can perhaps talk to you in a bit more detail about your book.
That would be lovely, and I just encourage your listeners
Thank you very much.
Write their stories. Nobody else will do it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.